Okay, so mistletoes, and this talk was previously mistletoes of the Hunter region, but the ones in the Sydney Basin are very similar. Many years ago, I lived out at Windsor, and the Windsor area isn't that different to the Hunter Valley. Now, mistletoes are a keystone plant in the environment. People think they're just another plant, but I hope I can convince you they support so much wildlife out there that if the mistletoes were missing, many species would be affected. So people think mistletoes are parasites. Well, they're hemiparasites, half parasites, which means they take water and minerals from the plant, but they don't take the sugars and other carbohydrates. So they're not too bad. And an interesting fact is that mistletoes don't have veins. We have veins, or arteries take our blood from the heart to the hands and feet and the limbs. Veins take the blood back to the heart. Plants have a xylem, which takes water and minerals from the roots to the leaves, and the phloem that takes the sugars back to the roots. Mistletoes do not have the phloem. So any water and minerals that go into the mistletoe cannot go back into the tree. So water is only lost through evaporation through the leaves. So the leaves have to pump the water through, and they'll do that up to 10 times the rate of the host leaves. And the water can evaporate out, but the minerals can't. So the minerals accumulate in the leaves. And that makes them pretty nutritious, because in Australia, some of those minerals, like phosphorus, are pretty rare. So do mistletoes kill trees? My personal observations are they don't kill trees, but they have difficulty infecting healthy trees, because trees have a natural defense and resistance to mistletoes. So mistletoes are more likely to affect a tree that is weaker and dying. And it does result in a shorter life for the mistletoes, but they get in a tree, they can multiply quick, and that's the way mistletoes work. Get in, multiply quick, and then die. And they also die under severe conditions. If you get a drought or a fire, you can lose a lot of mistletoe plants, and that's becoming a problem in the environment. And if you walk through the bush, you'll often find dead mistletoes, commonly in healthy trees. So what are the local mistletoes we're going to see when we go wandering? Ralph's been sending me photos of the long-flowered mistletoe. Mainly affects smooth bark eucalypts, but it can affect many others and commonly grows on exotic trees. And this mistletoe is ecologically very valuable. There's the erect mistletoe, which grows on Casuarinas and is also a fairly common species. The needle leaf mistletoe, a little bit more inland, grows on Casuarinas. And the Regent Honeyeater, which is an endangered species, loves to feed on this species. And this species is common around Cessnock. And I would think in the lower Blue Mountains or upper Blue Mountains, it should be there, but I can't recall seeing it. Creeping mistletoe, that can be very common in some areas. Mainly grows on eucalypts, but can grow on exotic trees. Banksia mistletoes, of course, grows on Banksias, but also quite a few exotics. I always feel really pleased when a mistletoe invades an exotic tree. Brush mistletoe, this is a rainforest species, not that common because rainforests aren't that common, but grows on a wide range of species. Grey mistletoe, that's an acacia specialist, and we've got the Goulburn River Valley in the Hunter Valley, which is just a beautiful valley to drive up. Gee, I'd love to have a farm up there. And lots of acacias and lots of this grey mistletoe, and also lots of birds feeding in it. So I really love it. We have box mistletoe and drooping mistletoe. That's the classic mistletoe that people see, the ball mistletoe growing in a tree. You'll see more of that in a few minutes, and grows in eucalypts. Paperbark mistletoe obviously grows in paperbarks, but we're clearing out of paperbark swamps, so it's becoming really rare and endangered. The Harlequin mistletoe, the Harlequin's got lots of colours, so this is quite a colourful mistletoe, grows in Casuarinas and acacias. And the fleshy mistletoe. This is a really interesting one because it's only grows on other mistletoes. So it's a parasite on parasites or a hyperparasite, and it's a beautiful plant. So let's have a closer look at them. This is the long-flowered mistletoe, Dendrophthoe, either vitellina or glabrescens. If you look up the books, the difference is pretty obvious, but there's so many intermediates. It appears to be one quite variable species, growing all the way from, I don't know, southern New South Wales up to Cairns and further north. Flowering at this stage, Ralph sent me some beautiful photos of it growing down in your area. And it's a beautiful flowering garden plant, but it also, look at those leaves, the way they've been eaten. That's the perfect plant to grow in your garden where it brings insects in. I love to see the plants in my garden with eaten leaves, because you know you've got an ecosystem working in your garden. And this is one of the best to develop that ecosystem. And there are some places it grows around the Newcastle area, but it does grow in your area, ask Ralph. But it also grows on London plane trees in one of the shopping centres, silver birch trees, and on one of my neighbour's place on his olive tree. Now, this is also an interesting one because the plants are often quite high and you can't reach them, but look on the ground, you'll often find fallen seed. So don't despair if the plants are up high. On the left, you can see the plant growing. Ralph sent me photos like that of plants down your way. On the right, you can see the black Jezebel butterfly. And if you grow that, you'll have these butterflies around. The top of the wing's white, but underneath this black colour, and quite a beautiful butterfly. Absolutely loves that mistletoe. It lays its eggs there and the caterpillars use it. On the left, you've got Dendrophthoe glabrescens, on the right, vitellina. They do look different species, but the point is they're growing on the same tree in the upper Hunter, Moonend Flat, and you can get intermediates between them. So it appears to be one variable species, but we need some botanists to work on it. This is the erect mistletoe, congenite, that grows on Casuarinas species, grows naturally on my block of land. I've got 15 hectares in Newcastle, which I've revegetated, and it's just beautiful. And this is the only species of mistletoe that grows here naturally, but I've planted a lot of it around. Now, it grows on the trees more so when they're dying. And I had one tree and I thought it had about 5 plants on it, but it blew down and I counted it. There were 30 large plants there and a lot of seedlings. So you often just don't notice what's up there until you either get binoculars on it or have a really good look. But it's an easy one to grow in your garden. Only grows on Casuarinas here, but if you're reading the book, they say it grows on lots of species. This is the needle leaf mistletoe, grows on Casuarinas again, and the flowers are often sought by the Regent Honeyeater, which is an endangered species. So that's a great reason to grow this mistletoe. And the plants or the leaves mimic the Casuarinas that they grow on. And for a long time, people said mistletoes mimic their host because possums want to eat the mistletoe leaves, so they're trying to hide. But someone realised possums feed at night. So looking the same as your host doesn't help much. And possums hunt by smell, not by sight. So it's not going to work at all. And then other people said, well, if the Casuarina's got a needle leaf because evolution's decided that's the best leaf for that environment, obviously mistletoes will have the same leaf. But then someone else realised, no, mistletoes have all this extra moisture available, so there's no need for them to have a needle leaf. So the latest theory is that the mistletoe mimics the host so that when the birds come down, they eat all the fruit off that mistletoe and think, gee, that was great tucker. I'll look for another plant. They look around, they can't see the mistletoe plants, but they can see the same needle leaf. So they head off to the next Casuarina to search for fruit, and in doing so, distribute these seeds to other Casuarina species. So that's why we think mistletoes mimic their host to aid seed dispersal to the right species of tree. someone might prove us wrong later, the same as the other two theories, but I'll stick to that one. Now, because they mimic their host, you look around, you go out there and you don't see many mistletoes. But I cycle to and from work every day, and as I go along the cycleway, it surprises me because you're looking at the track and you think, hey, there's mistletoe flowers. And you look up and there's a plant where you didn't know there was one. Or when I'm bushwalking, you're always looking at the ground when you're bushwalking so you don't trip, and you see mistletoe flowers on the ground. And then you look up and you find the plant. So don't just spend your time looking up, also look at the ground. It's a good way to find the mistletoes. And you don't just find the flowers, you will find the fruits below them. Anyway, this is the long flowered mistletoe growing on over one of the cycleways in Newcastle. The next mistletoe, this is a different form of cambagel, the needle leaf mistletoe, and the outside of the flowers are really hairy. This one's growing at Parkolban, which is the winery area. So if you go up that way, tell people you're going up to check mistletoes, but you may get thirsty and need a bit of liquid while you're up here. But the difference between this form of cambagel and the other one is quite distinct. So there's a lot of new varieties waiting to be described, and there's actually a number of new species waiting to be described. There's no botanist in Australia working on mistletoes, and there hasn't been for about 20 or 30 years. But I find they're beautiful plants and they're worth working on. Now, this is the creeping mistletoe, but this is a different genus, Muellerina. And these ones send runners along the trunk or the branches. And the Banksia mistletoe grows on quite a lot of exotic trees, London plane trees and things like that, but also quite a bit on Banksias, whereas the creeping mistletoe is usually just on the furry barked Eucalypts. Now, this one's growing on a furry barked Eucalypt, but the leaf and plant description fits Banksia mistletoe. So it could be Banksia mistletoe. I don't know. I've never seen this one flower. I've been watching it for almost 12 months. But these things hybridize. The other species I've shown you, Amyema species, rarely hybridize, but Muellerinas do. And I suspect this one's a hybrid and it's growing at one of the golf clubs in Newcastle area. Now, this is the brush mistletoe. This one's pretty rare, Newcastle, Sydney area, because it's a rainforest species and rainforests are rare. And the only way you'll find it is if you see flowers on the ground, because it grows up in the top where there's a bit of sunlight. But beautiful flowers. It's a very easy species to grow in your garden because it grows on so many trees. Here I've got it growing on a crown of gold tree. And the fruit you can see on the right is quite different to all the other mistletoes. Most mistletoe fruits, the seeds are eaten by the mistletoe bird and honeyeaters, and they squeeze the fruit, the seed pops out the end, they then eat that, go off and distribute it. These ones, you can squeeze them really hard and nothing pops out. Because in the rainforest, you don't get mistletoe birds. I'm convinced these ones are distributed by the fruit-eating pigeons, bowerbirds and things. They eat the whole fruit and then they fly off and poop out the seed an hour or two later. Here's the same species again growing in my garden, and you can see where I've put a seed there and it's growing quite well. They're quite impressive looking, aren't they, those seedlings? This is the grey mistletoe. It grows a bit further inland, doesn't like the humidity right on the coast, grows on wattles, and you can see a musk lorikeet there. It's actually eating the fruit, but they will feed on the flowers as well as the fruit. So there's a lot of benefits from growing mistletoes. This is the box mistletoe. This is the classic mistletoe people think of. You go driving in the countryside in Australia, you see these and think, yep, I know that's a mistletoe. And when it flowers, the plant on the left's just starting to come out and flower. You can see masses of flower. And on the right, look at it closely, quite beautiful flowers. And the fruit, I'm sure is taken by the Regent Honeyeater. I was only told recently, the flowers aren't, because the Regent Honeyeater is nomadic and it's not in this area when this species flowers in late summer and winter, but it is here when it's fruiting, and they love to nest in it. Now, what we just saw was box mistletoe. You can see it on the left there, but on the right, we have drooping mistletoe. These two species can be really hard to tell the difference, and you've got to look for 3 or 4 species to actually determine, 3 or 4 features to determine what species it is. But the drooping mistletoe tends to have the inverted teardrop shape, box mistletoe, the round shape. But both very ecologically valuable mistletoes. Butterflies absolutely love them. Paperbark mistletoe was probably very common at one stage, but we've cleared all our swamps. We don't have all the paperbarks growing. I only know of one tree with paperbark mistletoe, and I've been searching for years. But that's it there. It's a black tea tree, and it has quite a lot of it. And I've got to get it established before that tree dies. Yep, that just says what I've just told you. And Broadmeadow in Newcastle is a classic example. Was once a swamp. We're not allowed to call them swamps these days. They're wetlands, and it's all been cleared for sporting fields. I'd much prefer a wetland to a football ground, but we've got to cater for everyone. Now, on the paperbark mistletoe, this is the black Jezebel butterflies larvae, the caterpillars, and a pupae on the right. And I've recorded that, which was the first time they've been found on the paperbark mistletoe. Probably not because it's rare, but because the mistletoe is rare and people just don't find it. This is the Harlequin mistletoe. The Harlequin's a colourful guy, and you can see the mistletoe varies in colour, and they're quite beautiful. They don't have a lot of flowers, but they flower over a long period, growing on Casuarinas or acacias. This is the fleshy mistletoe. Lots of flowers because it's got lots of moisture available because it's growing on other mistletoes, and very dense. The small honeyeaters love to feed on a dense plant because they can just duck inside it if they feel threatened. So it's a good one to grow. So what's good about growing mistletoes? Why do we want to grow them? Well, first of all, the leaves. They get all this extra moisture, and they do get extra minerals. So it's a valuable resource for anything that wants to eat the leaves, such as caterpillars, a whole range of insects, and also possums. Flowers, the sap going in, and so there's going to be more sap available for more nectar. So lots of honeyeaters are going to want and come and feed on the mistletoes. The fruits are going to be fleshy, full of moisture, so you're going to get more fruit-eating birds. Insects, there's about 70 species of butterflies, plus some moths and other insects. And one of the moths is massive, Australia's biggest moth. And they depend on mistletoe as the food plant for their caterpillars. So it's required for their life cycle. So if you have mistletoes growing, you get more butterflies and these other insects. And that also means you get more insectivorous birds. So they're well worth growing for that. But mistletoes also give protection because they're a dense plant, and a lot of birds like to roost inside them for privacy, and they like to nest in them. And as I said before, they feel safer even feeding in there. So here's the brown-headed honeyeaters, 2 of them feeding in box mistletoe. And the box mistletoe has a lot of nectar available there. And more butterflies utilise this species of mistletoe compared to any other. So if you think the mistletoe doesn't look good, don't worry, the butterflies will make up for it. But I actually have trouble establishing this one in my garden, and it doesn't grow in the local area anyway. But I think that's why a lot of eucalypts shed their bark to stop the mistletoes establishing on them. Here's on the left, there's a painted honeyeater feeding on grey mistletoe, and on the right, the endangered Regent Honeyeater feeding on long-flowered mistletoe. And the singing honeyeater on an excellent example of the Harlequin mistletoe. So beautiful flowering plants. Here we have an olive-backed oriole, thinking we can't see it, sitting inside a nest in box mistletoe. And there's been 245 species of birds have been recorded nesting in mistletoes in Australia. And that's just not a claim, that's a fact by Birds Australia, and David Watson mentions it in his book on mistletoes. Now, here we've got the red-winged parrot feeding on mistletoe berries. It's a female, so it's not as colourful as the male, but it's not just the birds that distribute the seed. This is what we call destructive foraging. It's probably killing the seeds, and other parrots, the lorikeets, will feed off the flowers of mistletoes, and they probably won't pollinate them. So it's not just birds that help the mistletoes, there are others that take advantage of it for no benefit to the mistletoe. But the red-winged parrot is just a beautiful bird. I've shown you the Jezebel butterflies. There's another group of butterflies, the Lysianids, the jewels. They're small, 15 millimeters up to 20 millimeters long, but they are really interesting butterflies. On the top, we've got a caterpillar, we've got a pupae on the bottom right, and they are attended by ants that protect them. The caterpillars secrete honeydew, which the ants feed on. And the ants will actually take the caterpillar out to feed on a leaf and stop anything attacking it. Here's an example of a jewel butterfly. Colours are just spectacular. They're around, you've only got to start noticing them. Now, these are the Jezebel butterflies. On the left, you can see two egg masses on a long-flowered mistletoe, and on the right, they are the first instar larvae. Caterpillars can't, their skin doesn't stretch, so they've got to keep shedding their skin. They'll shed their skin 5 times. So first instar, second instar, that's second instar on the left, the yellow ones, third instars, the black ones. On the right, we've got fourth instar. They're getting to a good size. These are all on long-flowered mistletoes in my garden. And there you can see the final instar, but they've almost denuded the erect mistletoe, these ones. So I don't know if they'll get enough food for a successful pupation and developing into butterflies. But so they will certainly attack the mistletoes and denude them. The mistletoes recover. Its objective is to grow a lot of mistletoes, so even if they do denude some, there's always plenty of other ones. And that's growing in a wilga tree, by the way. I love the wilga trees. On the left, you can see a pupae in my wilga tree. On the right, the butterflies have emerged. They usually emerge early morning. So you go out and you might see a few of them there. This is the long-flowered mistletoe. If you're in the Newcastle area, I'm giving you places there you can go collect the seed. Talk to Ralph if you want to find out where to get seed where you live in the Sydney area. Now, if you want to grow mistletoes, you've got to collect seed. But what are the considerations? Well, the first thing, when you collect the seed, try to keep the seed intact. That fruit, or the fruit intact. You can see the fruit there. Those fruit, it's been found, have a really high concentration of carbon dioxide inside the fruit. The moment you rupture the fruit, and if you broke the stalk off, you've ruptured the fruit, the carbon dioxide leaks out, oxygen gets in, and the seeds start germinating. So try and keep the fruit intact like that, and it'll keep for weeks. You rupture it, it's only going to keep for days or a week at the most. Now, if you can see there on the right, seeds starting to germinate. That is a regurgitated mass of seed. If you can't find plants within reach to collect seed, look on the ground underneath the seed, and you might find this on the ground. A bird has come, it's usually currawongs. I'm trying to find out if other birds are involved as well. They eat the seeds. Now, once they eat the seeds and their stomach's full, they can't eat more seeds until they get rid of that. And they poop it out. That's going to take an hour or two. And they want to get their nutrition before then. So some birds simply regurgitate it so they can then have another feed, a bit like the Japanese when they have a great meal. And so if you look on the ground, you might find these regurgitated masses, collect them, the seed's still sticky, and you can attach it to a tree branch and grow those mistletoes. So you're going to plant them out. The easy bits will be at the bottom of the ladder, not the top. That's the advantage of suns. Find branches of pencil thickness, but sometimes I can find a branch of 2 or 3 centimetres and they'll still grow. Sometimes I use really thin branches and they'll grow. I look for areas of freshly shed bark. I lose a lot of germinating seedlings because the bark is shed, and sometimes you can put the fruit on and it can be 6 to 9 months later the bark shed and you still lose that germinating seedling. I put the seed along the long axis of the branch because you want that shoot to come out to find the branch. I put them on the underside of the branch most of the time because possums walk along the top of the branch. If they see the seedling, they'll eat it, and birds might just knock it off. Plus, I think droplets of moisture may collect on the underneath the branch, so there's more moisture available for that seedling that's otherwise exposed to the elements. And I often place the seed in a fork because it's easier. I use the favoured hosts. You read the book and it says this mistletoe has been found growing on trees in 10 families, 100 different species. I've tried that. It really doesn't work that well. If it's growing on a smooth bark eucalypt, put it on a smooth bark eucalypt. It's growing on a casuarina, put it on a casuarina. Acacia, put on acacia. You'll have much more success that way. But you can look for universal hosts. The best universal host is a wilga. When you read the book, says grows on acacias only, but also found on wilga. Grows on eucalypts, also found on wilgas. So wilgas seem to be a great thing, and that's why I've got probably about 15 wilgas growing in my garden. The wilgas think, oh, this is great, I'm growing in Peter Borden's garden, but they don't realise I'm going to put mistletoes all over them. And mistletoes need sunlight to grow well. So you might put them on a branch somewhere, and then the tree grows on, everything grows, it's in the shade. That mistletoe is not going to do too well. So try and find a branch that's going to have sunlight for quite a few years. So there is a safety issue when you're growing mistletoes. When you squeeze the fruit out or the seed out of the fruit, often it's really moist. You try and stick it on, keeps sliding off and all that sort of stuff. And you're using 2 hands to try and stick it on the branch. But if you're using 2 hands in the mistletoe seed, what do you hang on to? Nothing. It's dangerous. So I squeeze the seed out onto my sleeve and I put about 15 seeds at a time, sometimes 20, like that. Long sleeve shirt, short sleeve shirt, squeeze them all out and the shirt absorbs all the moisture. And then I climb up the tree and I just pick them off and put them on a branch and they stick really well. So that's the way to do it. They may still slide a bit, but it's just so much safer. One arm's holding onto the branch, the other arm's putting out mistletoe seeds. Now, lots of things can go wrong. You can see there, I put some seeds out on a branch and the branch died. They don't have much hope. On the right, you can see the council's planted some trees there. The trees were too big. They didn't water them. They're not going to die. They're always going to be a bit weaker. I look for those trees. The trees that are a bit weaker become great hosts. They don't grow as fast, and they're the ones I want to grow my mistletoes on. But lots can still go wrong. Look at that branch on the left. Now, it looks so good, a nice young branch, pencil thickness, and that mistletoe seedling didn't have a hope. Someone should give it a blue pill. Look on the right, you can see the shoots coming out. 3 of the shoots go down and the 4th one decides to go up. There's always one in every crowd and I've got no idea why it happens. These are some other ones I'm growing. On the left, you can see that slide there. The shoot on the far left, the blue arrow, just went straight down. The middle one curled over the back, found a dead branch and attached to it. It doesn't have a hope either. On the right, curled over itself, got onto the green branch, that might grow. And look at the one on the right. That's the screwiest mistletoe seedling I've ever seen. It didn't have a hope. But if you look at the top of the seedling, you can actually see that little cup. The outside bit sticks to the branch, the green branch. The inner bit there secretes or produces enzymes that breaks down the bark so it can then penetrate through the bark. So it's interesting seeing that little cup that latches on to the branch to allow it to grow. Now, so my observations when I'm trying to grow mistletoes is 95% of seeds germinate. It's easy to get them to germinate, but only about 50 to 70% of seedlings find the branch. And you saw some of the ones that don't find the branch, and I've got no idea why that happens. After 1 year, seedlings get to 2 to 10 centimetres in size. Only about 10% reach that stage. On the second year, they're 20 to 40 centimetres in size. Only 5% get to that stage. And only 1 to 5% of seeds survive to become a plant that flowers. So it's a numbers game when you grow mistletoes. Get a lot of seeds, put a lot out. And in my garden, I've got lots of possums that come around and eat a lot of plants. So I accept a success rate of about 1%, but I try and put out 1,000 seeds every year. It's not that difficult because if you find a tree in fruit, it's easier to often get 100 fruits, so 100 seeds, because the trees that they do best on are always dying. So there's always this cycle, this turnover of mistletoes in your garden. Don't think they're going to take over and cause a problem. It just doesn't happen. And I find local species grow well, and the other species are really difficult to grow. And I guess that's why they're not growing here naturally. Nature's trying to tell us something. So here we've got some seedlings. These are basically 12 months old. They're at least 9 months old, between 9 and say 15 months. That's all you can expect. And getting on to 2 years, this is what you can see. These are about to take off after about 15 months, 18 months of growth, and they're doing better. This is a erect mistletoe growing on Casuarinas. But what can go wrong? Well, this is a brush mistletoe, and the possums come along and decide to eat the one leaf the mistletoe had. And I'm just glad it didn't eat the whole stem because the thing would have died, but that's going to keep growing. Butterflies eat them, knocks them back a lot, but the butterflies can't kill them. They just knock them back a long way. Incompatibility, or trees reject the seedlings. That's different things because I grow acacia mistletoes on acacias, but some acacias, the moment the mistletoe germinates, that branch dies. The acacias seem to be able to detect the parasite attaching, and that's their protection. Or eucalypts will just shed their bark and the seedling's lost, and sometimes it's just incompatible. So a seedling that might grow on one species of acacia won't grow on others. And the same with eucalypts. Dry weather is a problem. A seed on a branch like that is going to suffer from dryness. I'm sure they need quite a bit of moisture. We've just come through.
Make up for the lack of ponds with what?
Yep. We've just come through a very dry period a year ago and 2 years ago. Very few of my seedlings survived over that period. And I would actually put sprinklers on the trees to water my seedlings. Didn't help much, but they do much better when you get regular rainfall. And what are those hairs on that shoot for if it's not to help absorb water? I don't think it works to scare off possums because they still eat them. Wet weather can be a problem. Seeds just get washed off, especially the inland mistletoes. They seem to form a gel around them. They absorb all the water they can from rain because rain's not common out there and they need the water, but then they just get washed off. And other times fungus kills grey mistletoe seedlings. Shade kills them. They need sunlight. So plan ahead. When you put them, hopefully sun will still be there in 3 or 4 years' time. I've said branches die, I've explained that. But as eucalypts grow up, the lower branches die and they're producing new branches up top. So be careful putting them on the lower branches. And there's lots of unknowns, and I'm trying to work out what these unknowns are. There's a lot of work to be done. So who else is growing mistletoes? BirdLife Australia. They've got a couple of projects growing as many mistletoes as they can, because if you want to get some of these birds around, you can plant trees, but it's going to be 10 to 20 years before you're getting flowers. Much easier to put mistletoes out. You're getting really good flowers in 3 to 5 years. So it's a great way to enrich the environment, and the birds actually look for mistletoes. Melbourne City Council has been growing a lot of mistletoes for about 15 years. They had all these London plane trees down there, and they wanted to improve their environment, and there's no way the population will let you dig out these London plane trees, chop them down to grow a native, so they decided to put mistletoes on them, and they've done a lot of that and it's been very successful. Newcastle City Council is getting into growing mistletoes, which is wonderful to see. And there's also lots of enthusiasts who are getting out there and growing as many mistletoes, and like me, encouraging everyone else to grow mistletoes. So if you want to grow mistletoes, what are the reference books? There are 2 books out there. These are them. The one on the right, you've got to contact the Butterflies and Other Invertebrates Club. It's a really good book, very good for identification. The one on the left by David Watson has a lot more information, but they're both just as good for identification. I love both books. I've got both books, whatever one suits you. But you should get one, and you should start growing mistletoes. So that's it, everyone.
If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and view other great content? New videos being added all the time.